President Trump is reportedly leaning towards expanding military operations against Iran. They include potentially sending in ground forces to occupy Iran's oil hub of Karg Island and bombing the underground nuclear site at Pickaxe Mountain.
And Mr. Trump believes that Tehran still wants to strike a deal, saying the Iranians want to meet. Tehran's top negotiator says the door to a diplomatic solution remains open, but stressed that Iran views the Strait of Hormuz as integral to its national security. For more insight, let's speak now with Hussein Banai, Associate Professor of International Studies at Indiana University. Thank you for joining us, Professor. So President Trump reportedly considering broader strikes, including on power plants, bridges, even nuclear sites. And what's the most likely next move from Washington? And would that fundamentally change the conflict?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is an escalation in rhetoric, whether it'll level up to the level of military attacks on those very sensitive sites again. It remains to be seen, but it's very clear that the president wants to signal that he's willing to open a new phase of this war. If the first phase was to demonstrate that Iran has very few defensive capabilities when it comes to withstanding attacks by the United States and Israel, in the second phase, the U.S. wants to demonstrate that it can really break down Iran to its knees, as it were, if it does not compromise when it comes to the control of the strait. Of course, the Iranians think that the control of the strait is something that they won in the first phase, so they have to demonstrate resilience in the face of these escalations as well.
In the meantime, Professor, Iran has threatened to close even more trade routes, but I'm wondering if it's in danger of overplaying its export corridor card now, because if Tehran also disrupt shipping at the Bab el-Mandab, for example, surely that multiplied impact is going to be felt even by its close allies like China. So I'm wondering if you think it could tip the global scale against Iran if it actually does so.
It could indeed. I mean, I think at an economic level, it's very clear that the most vulnerable countries to any blockage of the strait would be the countries that very much have been on the side of Iran, who are the beneficiary of its oil, cheap oil flows outside of Iran, like China, like you mentioned. But I think much more importantly in this second phase, the big gamble that the Iranians could make is that they make their military positions safeguarding the strait vulnerable to American full-scale attack and the annihilation of their defensive capabilities of the strait itself. That's something that they were able to really demonstrate that they can safeguard by lobbing missiles at vulnerable targets in other Arab countries. But what happens if the United States goes all in and actually does undertake a ground invasion and captures those sensitive military sites that Iran now controls and through which it projects power in this strait? So there's a danger that they could overplay their hand militarily as well.
And is Iran aware of this potential escalation as you just outlined? I mean, I'm wondering how big this red line is for Iran. Is it really existential, or could Tehran be open to some sort of a system the way, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia handle the Straits of Malacca? In Singapore, money still comes in various ways, contributions, while at the same time keeping the international, or the strait rather, open to international shipping?
Well, I mean, you're speaking to the key dilemma faced by the Iranian leaders at this point, which is how much are they willing to sacrifice to demonstrate that they have complete control over the strait? If that was a hard-won bargaining chip in the first phase of the war, what else are they willing to risk this time around? It's very clear that they've aggravated all of their Arab allies by these retaliatory strikes that they undertake on their territories. They could say it's U.S. military personnel or bases that they're targeting, but it's very clear that they're also targeting their energy routes, etc. So are they willing to sacrifice those alliances? And secondly, I think because that first phase was, they viewed this bargaining chip of the strait such a hard-won battle, I think the key question to ask of themselves is there any other diplomatic exit ramp they could offer the United States and this president, who clearly wants to have a narrative of victory and will not let go, President Trump, until he also has a narrative that suits his political purposes as well. So I think that what we're seeing right now is finding an equilibrium point between those two very sensitive and difficult positions in this conflict.
And Professor, you mentioned the Gulf allies. I mean, this renewed U.S.-Iran war is hitting them hard with missiles, drones, and the disruptions to shipping. If this becomes a prolonged conflict, can Gulf countries realistically defend themselves over the long term?
They can't. I mean, they've already demonstrated that they can be made collateral damage very quickly if the United States does not provide credible deterrence against Iranian attacks or support them with anti-missile technology in a more robust way. So their reliance on American military becomes much greater the longer this conflict goes. And that's another calculus that Washington has to factor in as they try to neutralize Iranian attacks. And that is precisely what the Iranians want to also deliver, to sort of say, it's not just a burden on American military, but also on American allies in the region. And don't forget, this time around, the economic cost is going to be much greater because the entire global oil reserves are much lower as a result of the first phase. That blow could be absorbed much better 3 months ago, but right now the global oil reserves are much lower, and that could really hurt Arab allies of the United States as well.
Professor Banai, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and time with us this morning. Hussein Banai is Associate Professor of International Studies at Indiana University.